All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this virtual village board meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board to order on January 4th, 2021, our first meeting in the new year. We hope that everyone had a very healthy and safe and happy holiday season. We're all very happy to turn the page and get into 2021. And so we are meeting again virtually tonight, because it is not yet practical or prudent to meet in person. So with that, I would like to ask that you would all please rise and join the village board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Padovani?
Here.
Trustee Scaletta?
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Here.
Trustee LaBedz?
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Here.
Trustee Canty?
Here.
Trustee Baldino?
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Here.
President Hayes?
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we have just one set to approve tonight. That's from our meeting, a village board meeting on December 21, 2020. Are there any changes or passes? Seeing none. Was it by Trustee Rosenberg? And who was?
Second.
Second by Trustee Baldino. Any further questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Next is the approval of the accounts payable, and I'm calling Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of December 30th, 2020 in the amount of $773,400.86.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Padovani. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Well, there are no recognitions or presentations tonight, so we'll move on to citizens to be heard. And there were some questions submitted from Melissa Kayer this evening in advance of the meeting, and so I call on our village clerk, Becky Hume, to read those into the record. Becky?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me pull those up. The first question is, what is the status of the ERP system? And what does ERP stand for? And then the second question was, will you streamline the village vehicle sticker transaction so a customer does not walk away with 4 receipts for a single transaction?
All right, thanks, Becky. Any other written comments received in advance of the meeting?
No, none tonight.
Okay, thank you. I would like to call on our Assistant Village Manager, Diana Makula, to respond to Melissa's questions, if you would. Diana?
Hi, Mayor. Certainly I can respond. So the status of the ERPs, we're actually heavily involved in vendor demonstrations. So we've narrowed down the vendor selection to 4, and we're heavily involved in looking at their top 100 offerings. Staff is going to be rating the demonstrations to determine the best option for the village. So far, we've had 28 vendor demonstration meetings, and by I'd say the third week of February, we'll have completed 56 vendor meetings. So we're heavily involved in the process. We hope to have a selection before you, end of first quarter or the beginning of second quarter. So that's the status of the ERP. The ERP itself is an enterprise resource planning software. It standardizes and streamlines and integrates many of the business processes across various different business activities. So it's commonly referred to as an integrated software program. You capture data, you track, you can report, and you can share data across the entire organization. It also will offer a lot of customization and enhancements for the residents and for the business community itself. I think the third question was regarding the vehicle stickers.
Right.
And that process itself. So that is actually one thing that was identified with the need to improve vehicle stickers for the residents and in internal applications as well. So that is a process we know we can improve, and it's part of cash receipting. And that is actually currently being reviewed actually this week. We've been doing that as part of software review, or was completed last week. So we hope to be able to offer some streamlined, less paper to our residents.
Well, thanks, Diana, for those answers. And thank you, Melissa, for submitting those questions. And I do want to thank Diana and her team for their tremendous work in this ERP process. I know personally how hard they've been working on this for months now. And so we are very much looking forward to a recommendation and finalization so we can put this new system to work for the benefit of our residents and businesses. So thank you, Diana, and all members of the ERP team.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll pass it along to the rest of the team.
All right, thank you. All right, we are still under citizens to be heard. So are there any members of the audience who wish to address the board on an item not on the agenda? I see no hands raised, and so we will close the citizens to be heard portion of the agenda and move on to old business, of which there is none. And so we'll then move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? I see no requests. And so are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any items on the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion to approve by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We move on then in the agenda to new business, and there is one item to consider tonight. That's the request from Trammell Crow Senior Living for a rezoning of the office transitional district to the institutional district and a planned unit development to allow a 175-bed senior living facility to be located at 2015-2045 South Arlington Heights Road. And I know there's a big team from the petitioner present this evening, and I don't know for sure, but I believe Mary Baumler might be the spokesman. Mary?
Yes.
And did I pronounce your last name correct?
Close. Bemler.
Bemler, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We've got your materials, but we're certainly looking forward to your presentation. So please take it away.
Great. And Charles, am I able to screen share here? It looks like I might actually be.
Yeah, if you try screen share, you might be enabled.
Perfect. Oh, yeah. Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor Hayes, and thank you to the Board of Trustees for giving us the opportunity to present our project this evening. My name, again, Mary Bemler, and I'm with Trammell Crow Company. I will kind of briefly run through these slides. I know the board has, it's our impression that the board has read through the Planning Commission meeting minutes. So hopefully everybody's up to speed there. I am joined by Grady Hamilton and Chris Nicola with my team, and Trammell Crow Company. Grady runs our business unit here in Chicago in the Midwest, and Trammell Crow, we do business across the country. We're in 18 different offices, and our team here is based in the Chicagoland area, and we develop across the Midwest. With our architecture and design team, we've got Lucas Van Sistine and Gretchen Camp with ESG Architects. ESG is based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they do architecture across all product types as well. And they are, this is our 14th project together between Trammell Crow and ESG. We also have our civil, landscape, and traffic consultants on as well. And I am also joined by Joe Mikulich with Allegro Senior Living, who is our operator for the property. Allegro is a respected leader in the senior living space, and they actively engage in ownership, project development, and property management services in the senior living space. And currently, Trammell Crow, ESG, and Allegro have 5 active adult projects completed throughout the Midwest. One of those is Avador Glenview in Glenview, Illinois. And another one is Avador Evanston in Evanston, Illinois. And I know these were part of the Planning Commission package as well. So hopefully you saw those notes on there. So the reason why we're here tonight is obviously the project that we're proposing with Arlington Heights, which is at 2045 South Arlington Heights Road. It's approximately 8.2 acres. As you know, it's 4 single-story office buildings that sit on that property right now. And we're proposing a 3-story, 175-unit luxury senior living development that has independent living, assisted living, and memory care units with ample amount of amenity space. And I'm going to ask Joe Mikulich with our operator just very quickly to speak to kind of the layout and overall operational approach to the project real quick.
Great, thanks, Mary. My name is Joe Mikulich. I'm a Senior Vice President of Development at Allegro Senior Living. I've been with the company for 8 years now, and I've been in the senior housing industry for about 15. One thing that sets Allegro apart is the rental continuum of care model that we specialize in, and you see in front of you. This is a concept that is intended to allow our residents to age in place. We try to attract residents when they're slightly younger, more active, and for us that still means in their mid-80s. But then to have the services and the infrastructure in place to allow our residents to stay in our building, move to our assisted living neighborhood as their physical needs change, and then potentially move to our secured, fully secured memory care neighborhood if there's any cognitive decline in our residents. And this hub and spoke model is a prototype that Allegro has perfected over the 22 years that we've been in the senior housing business. The design is intended to keep the footprint compact and to allow the sharing of some of the common areas, and especially the dining areas. The one central commercial kitchen needs to be able to service all 3 neighborhoods. So this hub and spoke model allows us to stack all of the admin space and the amenity space in the core of the building, which means that our residents that live at the end of quarters are just walking to that core, catching an elevator up or down to get to whatever amenity or dining area that they are seeking that day or that time. And within this building, it's important to note that we do not want our assisted living residents to feel like second-class citizens. So there is no tangible difference between the assisted living units and the independent living units outside of appliances. The assisted living residents receive a full meal plan, and they get all their laundry and housekeeping done for them. So they don't have a washer and dryer. They don't have a full kitchen range. They don't have a dishwasher. But beyond that, the size of the units, the quality of the finish is all the same. And within this building, we expect to draw residents that already live in Arlington Heights or are moving close to family members that already live in Arlington Heights. We've done a lot of research on where we draw our residents from, and we found that about 70% comes from within a 5 to 7 mile radius, and the other 30% moves to our neighborhood to be close to typically adult children, but sometimes siblings and other loved ones. You could go to the next slide. Just also want to give a brief picture of what's going on inside the building. I'm going to keep it brief and then answer questions at the end, but it's important to note that this is a very intense operational business. We're providing dining services, activities, housekeeping, care, and then we do have a full front office staff that you see to the left. So it's a combination of salaried employees, part-time employees. It's very important to have variable staffing to meet the amount of care that our current resident profile needs. So we are doing this constantly shifting staffing model for both dining and care. But overall, once this building is up and running and stabilized, it's going to employ the equivalent of 100 FTEs. And we always try to have our staff shifts occur at non-peak hours, so we're not adding to peak hour trips in our neighborhood. So that's what you see on the upper right. It's not like a complete staff shift, but the heaviest staff shifts are our care staff. And you can see that the first one goes from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Second shift is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And the final shift is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And because our residents are more active during the day, the amount of care staff that are on the property through the night tail off a little bit. And then finally, we get a lot of questions about traffic and deliveries. So we did want to spell out Allegro through the 20 years of operational experience. We've concluded that a 1-to-1 parking ratio is more than sufficient for our peak usage, which isn't going to be a weekday daytime use, but it's going to be an occasional holiday, Mother's Day. Sometimes we get more visitors on weekends. So you can see here that with the typical resident utilization, only 45% of our independent living residents have cars on our properties, about 10% of assisted living. And then, with those staff shifts, typically the weekday daytime hours are when we are going to have our peak staffing hours, and that's going to be at most 45 to 50 employees once this building is fully stabilized. So you can see, tallying it up, that still leaves plenty of additional parking for visitors on those holidays and peak hour visit hours. And if it isn't sufficient, then we've always been able to come up with an arrangement with a church, an office building, some parking that is not in use on those holidays or non-business hours, and provide a shuttle service for our employees. Again, only if it comes up that we are light on parking. And then finally, the delivery schedule. You can see we are going to be utilizing local food, fresh vegetables, fresh meat, fresh seafood vendors. They're coming about once a day. We will have some national food service providers that will provide a delivery once a week. But if you add it up, it's really about 1 to 2 deliveries per day. And we always try to work with those vendors to come at, again, non-peak hours for driving. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer questions at the end. And with that, I'll hand it back to Mary.
Thanks, Joe. So one of the main pieces that we just wanted to highlight here quickly is, obviously we love the city the village of Arlington Heights and the opportunity for senior development here. But what we do is absolutely look into the market and an analysis on the supply and demand and whether this use can be supported. And so we commissioned a market study by ProMatura to look at the demographic and economic and competitive conditions of the market. And that is where you see here in this 5-mile PMA. We can go into more detail on this, as questions arise. But we essentially commissioned this study last June after our conceptual plan review committee. And then since being informed by the staff about the Ryan Company's potential project, we've actually incorporated that project. That's the second kind of snapshot down here on how that would affect the supply demand analysis as well. And so we did that for a 5-mile radius and a 7-mile radius, which is where, as Joe said, the majority of your residents are coming from. And we can talk more on how that number basically evolves from, being a 75 plus household, at an income threshold where that demand, the competitive units, annual turnover, assuming everybody that turns over is going to these competitive units, what's that market opportunity? The reality of the situation is some of those residents that are moving out of other buildings might be coming to ours, but this study specifically shows new residents, not existing market residents. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to let Lucas, our architect, very briefly just talk about the design of the building, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. I'm an architect and Vice President at ESG Architecture and Design, and I'll just spend a minute here talking about our design thoughts. So you'll see on this slide, we're going for a contemporary design with a limited material palette, but also with some traditional type detailing. You'll see at the cornice, and there's various window detailing that gives a more familiar feel, but then that contemporary material palette with the gray is a brick with a little bit of sheen, and then the white is a cementitious panel, and then the browner color is a wood look siding. If you want to go to the next slide, Mary. And as Joe was mentioning, the building is almost a metaphor for a city, kind of the way I see it. You've got the center activity and the wings as neighborhoods. And so the architecture is following this pattern. You'll see at the wings kind of a townhome feel that feels a little more like individual residences rather than living in this large building. And then at the center, there's more glass, so it feels like storefront, and so that's sort of the city center, if you will. So it's kind of fun using that metaphor to inspire the design here. And with that, I think we're wrapped up, unless Mary, you have anything, but we've got our entire team here, which is ready to dig in if you have questions in any area. So thank you.
All right, Mary, anything else?
We are ready to answer any questions. All these folks on the line.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you for your presentation. I will like to turn to our Planning Department Director, Charles Perkins, for the staff presentation before we go to the board for questions. So, Charles.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and everybody. Can everybody see the screen?
We got it, Charles.
Okay, I'd just like to walk through some of the zoning actions that are being requested. As mentioned, the current zoning on the property is an OT, Office Transitional District. It's a single-story office building built in the 60s. It's kind of a low-intensity office use. The proposed rezoning would be to I Institutional District, which is also a comparable transitional type zoning district. The petitioner, Trammell Crow, is seeking 4 variations, one for density to allow an increased number of units on the property above what the typical maximum density in the I district would allow. And that's about a 25% increase. That sounds a lot. In reality, we did have a different proposal about a year and a half ago from Urban Street, a market rate apartment development. And their proposal was 240 units with a small commercial component at the corner of Seegers and Arlington Heights Road. And that was significantly under the density that could be built on an R7 district. So the I district is a very low intensity district, and in many cases it's in a residential neighborhood, such as Lutheran Home and Luther Village, surrounded by single family homes. In this case, it's along a commercial corridor, Arlington Heights Road, with 32,000 daily vehicles traveling along the street. So allowing a higher density in this location, staff viewed as appropriate from a land use point of view. Still in a 3-story range, which was consistent with the South Arlington Heights Road redevelopment plan. They are seeking some variations from the size of the units, primarily for the studios in the assisted living and the independent care. And also a couple of minor variations for exterior structures and fire pits in a side yard, and for one parking lot pole to be separated further than what's required by code. So the area is a 8-acre site on South Arlington Heights Road. If the board recalls, in 2019, the South Arlington Heights Road corridor was adopted, and there are a number of key development standards that were outlined for this property and for the corridor. And this plan starts to implement some of those. The first one being the sidewalk. So the sidewalk along the east side of Arlington Heights Road is what we call a carriage walk. It's right next to the curb, extremely intimidating and unfriendly for any pedestrians to walk along there with 32,000 vehicles a day, traveling at 35 miles an hour. So this plan pushes that sidewalk back about 8 to 10 feet from the curb, starts to introduce a landscape parkway with parkway trees to start to make that potential for pedestrians to walk along the corridor a little nicer. It will take several years to implement, as other sites along the corridor going further south start to redevelop. We have also asked for a cross-access easement to be planned for and incorporated to allow future access with the property to the south. And the Plan Commission had a lot of discussion about that. They asked staff to reevaluate that and discuss that with the petitioner. We have done that along with Village Attorney Hart Passman, and you'll note in the recommendation some highlighted and strikeout language that both the village staff, the village attorney, and the petitioner have agreed to. The other element of the plan calls for trying to bury the or relocate the Commonwealth Edison overhead lines that are really unsightly along the corridor. This is a very long-term project, extremely costly, but the only way to do that would be to obtain easements from the properties along the east side of the road. So we have requested a 20-foot easement, potentially up to 25 feet, for Commonwealth Edison to, at some point in the future down the road, relocate those overhead utility lines. This exhibit shows the potential cross-access easement to the property to the south. On the west is the parkway that I'd mentioned to shift the sidewalk further away from Arlington Heights Road. And this is the area for the 20-foot Commonwealth Edison easement. This exhibit on showing in highlighted in red, that's the rear yard setback where accessory structures are allowed. And this is where the accessory structures and fire pits and things of that nature are proposed, which is technically a side yard. So a variation is needed for that. It's concealed, designed very nicely. Again, staff had no issues with that. And then there's one light pole that needs additional separation from the code requirements. Parking wise, they exceed the minimum parking requirements. The required parking is 163 spaces and 193 are provided on site. And then this is the modified language that was in the packet of information online that you received. The green is the new language that I'd referenced earlier that's been agreed to, and the red is a strikeout from the Plan Commission recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There are a few other conditions, but I won't read all of those, and I'll just be available for questions.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Charles. We will then go to the board for questions. Any questions from the village board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I just have a few questions at this time. Charles, are there existing businesses still in the office buildings that are there?
Yes, we've been told it's about 40% vacant, and then many of those tenants are on month-to-month leases. Village manager and I had a meeting with the property owners probably 2 years ago, and they expressed concerns over the economics of their development and the fact that many of the rents were not at market rates, and the ownership was interested in selling the property. And so there've been a couple of different developers that have come along and expressed interest, and this is the Trammell Crow is the only developer that's followed through with a full Plan Commission application. So there are tenants that are in the buildings. It was premature for us to reach out to them at this point until there was something approved by the board, but our plan would be to try to reach out to as many as we can, give them information on available sites in the community. We pay an annual subscription to CoStar, which is an online resource, so we can do searches of available space at different sizes and try to assist those businesses and keep them in Arlington Heights.
Okay, that's really what I wanted to know about, because I know that's been done in other situations when projects have moved forward. I guess this next question is for Mary, and it's really just the way I read the project narrative. And in it, you talked about the various lengths of stay at different levels in the project. And it may just be how I read it, but it said that a resident may only be in memory care for 1.5 years. And you mean that in terms of that might be the extent of the rest of their life. Is that what you meant? Not that they, after 1.5 years, have to leave.
And I'm going to let Joe answer that because he's the operational expert. But yes, Joe, you can speak to tenure for most of your residents just based on history.
Yeah, and we do not, there's no length of stay limit for any of our residents in any neighborhood. I know Mary was just quoting industry averages for lengths of stay in certain neighborhoods. So as I mentioned before, we have this continuum of care model so that our residents in IL can move to AL when they have the physical needs and then move to memory care when they have the cognitive needs. So that 18 months is just your average memory care resident stay across the entire nation.
Okay, all right, thank you. It was one of those sentences where depending on how you read it and whether in your mind you put in a comma somewhere or not, it changed the nature of what it meant. So thank you, I appreciate that. That's all I have right at the moment. Thank you.
Okay,
Might
thank
have
you.
other questions later.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Joe, the meals that are prepared, are they prepared on site or are they prepared off site and brought in?
All meals are prepared on site. We will have a dedicated chef and wine cooks and even wait staff. So all food service is provided on site.
Okay. So I think when Mary showed that number of employees, that really wasn't inclusive of the dining staff or cooking staff as far as that goes or anything?
Right. She only broke out the care staff shift times, but there will be some dining staff that will come in even earlier. Typically, the dining staff comes in starting at 6 a.m. Then the care teams come in at 7, And then a few of those frontline, the admin people will be coming in at 8 o'clock, 8:30, but it's about 5, maybe 8 people at stabilization when we have a full building.
And then typically, as far as the number of residents, I assume, I don't know what your restrictions are as far as automobiles. Are somebody in assisted living obviously probably wouldn't be a driving person,
right? You know, we don't police that. I think it's hard enough for family members to police their loved ones driving, but it's very rare. That 5 to 10% of AL residents is from a recent survey across our whole portfolio, and then about, you know, the 45% for independent living was actually the highest number of independent living residents with cars we've seen at any of our communities. There were a few others that were down to 15, 20%, but to be conservative, we wanted to quote the highest percentage of IL residents at any one community, and that was 45%.
So you're saying out of I think it's what, 93 independent living units? Approximately half of those could potentially be drivers.
Yes, that's correct. And what happens most of the time is once our residents move in with us, see the services provided on site, but also the transportation that we provide that comes with rent. We will provide daily group outings to shopping, grocery shopping, clothes shopping, events, theater. But then we will also have a Cadillac or a town car that any resident outside of memory care, but any independent living or assisted living resident can reserve, and we will take them wherever they want to go within 10 miles free of charge. And that's to allow our residents to keep their same doctor, keep their same circle of friends. So usually once our residents move in with us and see what we provide, those cars just sit there in the parking lot.
And then out of the 93 independent units, what's the breakdown typically between studio 1 and 2 bedroom?
Lucas might be able to answer that question.
Am I off? Oh, yes. For this project specifically, the majority of the units are 1-bedroom units, 1-bedroom den units. So a small percentage is studios. It's about 6% are studios. The 1-beds and the 1-bed dens make up about 40%. And then the 2-bed units make up about 9%.
Okay. And that's what then drives the differential in the pricing as far as from the, you know, I think it was like 3 to, I forget what the number was.
Yes, the rent increases by the size of the unit.
Okay.
Exactly right.
And then one question for your traffic person. I don't remember who it is, but whoever they are.
Yep, we have Louis with KLOA on the line.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
So, Louis, your experience with a development like this, where you do have somewhere between 15 and 40% of the people driving, and you know, I saw the level of service on the traffic was not the greatest. In some cases, D, E, and F,
Right.
and a lot of counts and things. I just fear that, you know, obviously the older people get, and you know, they don't drive the best, so to say. Just curious as to your comment about that, and you know, how this would affect moving into traffic from this development that doesn't have the greatest level of service existing today. So.
Sure. I mean, generally speaking, this development is not a high traffic generator. Just compared to the office use that currently exists on the site, it's significantly lower. So from an impact on the area roadways, it will have a positive impact. As far as the residents driving, I mean, as you heard, not too many of them will have a vehicle. The ones that may have it, their travel habits will likely not be same time as the rush hour. So if they're out and about, it's going to be probably during off-peak hours. The amount of traffic that The facility we generate during the peak hours will be lower and will probably be driven a lot by some of the employees that work there. So we don't anticipate this as being impactful. We are limiting the access drive on Arlington Heights Road to right in, right out. So we're making that a safer intersection, easier for the users of the facility and the residents to access the roadway system. And then, the rest will be spread out on the adjacent roadway network.
You don't expect this to cause any need or that IDOT would implement any kind of traffic light on tone or anything like that, or as a result of this project at all, right?
No, yeah, I mean, IDOT has already reviewed this, and they're together with the village staff mandated that the access drive be restricted to right in, right out. Other than that, they had no other comments or concerns about this project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the village board? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Thank you so much for your presentation. Reviewed the materials. The layout of the development looks well thought out. So kudos to you guys, and the exteriors that we've been shown been pleasing and vibrant. So I think that would be an upgrade, on the south part of our village. Let's start out, since Trustee Rosenberg asked a lot of the questions I was going to regarding the parking. Let me understand. So we got to right in, right out on Arlington Heights Road, and that was determined by who, or recommended by who?
This is Louis Abuna again with KLOA. So this was, we made a submittal to IDOT, which has jurisdiction over the road, and they deemed the intersection as it exists today doesn't meet their current criteria in terms of spacing and the ability to provide a left turn lane on Arlington Heights Road to safely accommodate the left turning movements. So they mandated that the curb cut be converted to a right in, right out. And the village engineering department also had similar concerns about the design of the driveway, and they agreed that it should be restricted to right in, right out.
Okay. The reason I asked is, please, Charles, go ahead.
If I could add as well, it also helps with some of the longer term concepts that were identified in the South Arlington Heights Road plan, as far as the potential for a traffic signal at the former Wellington School District 59 property, if and when that redevelops, and then the potential for landscape medians along Arlington Heights Road, which would have the same effect as restricting this driveway to right in, right out only. So it does help potentially implement some of those. It's still a challenge with some other properties, especially on the west side of the street, but that is a long-term goal on the plan. So it certainly helps, and that's the other reason, one of the other reasons for requiring the access easement to the property to the south. So when that redevelops, and if there's a complementary use there, residents could traverse, without going on the public street to get to a use, if it's a medical office or a restaurant or something of that nature.
So Charles, if I work or I live there and I want to go south on Arlington Heights Road to the expressway, how do you envision that happening?
You would probably exit the driveway on the east side of the property and go south on Tony Road to the signal at Tony and Algonquin, and then take a right at Algonquin Road to the Arlington Heights Road, Algonquin Road signal, and then go south to the tollway.
Okay, I would agree with you, because trying to turn left off of Seegers onto Arlington Heights Road, between the petitioner's property and Johnny's Beef, you have a lot of people who are headed south on Arlington Heights Road who want to turn left onto Seegers, which then prevents the people who want to turn left on Arlington Heights Road from being able to really kind of make a move, because they're watching 3 lanes of traffic coming from the south, and then you got 3 lanes of traffic from the north, plus the people who want to turn left onto Seegers. So I would just hope that that's part of maybe the education that the petitioner passes on to the employees and the residents of the development, just because it is a challenging area for turning left to go south on Arlington Heights Road. Okay. Can you tell me just a little bit about the flood control for the property? Want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're putting our best foot forward and that we're not creating any problems in the south corridor because there's going to be further development in that area. And we want to make sure that we don't start off on the wrong foot. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about the efforts that you guys are making when it comes to flood control.
Yes, and Brian just took himself off mute, our civil engineer, because he knows this question is directed at him related to detention and retention on the site. So Brian?
I am Brian Ratajczak with SpaceGo, site civil engineer for the project. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the proposed stormwater management basins are located along the south side of the property. The property drains from west to east. It's also been brought up by the village engineering staff that drainage systems to the north are limited in capacity. So part of the drainage could go that way. But it's being designed to go out to the storm sewer to the east, which then flows to the south. The system's designed in accordance with the village's release rate system and also with MWRD ordinance requirements in regards to volume control.
Great, thank you. I think that's, when we have a redevelopment of a property the size that we're talking about, I think that everyone always wants to make sure that that's a question that the board asks to make sure. I mean, you've provided us with a lot of details and plans, but I think it's a question that people want to have answered by the petitioner. The last question I have for you, Charles, could you pull up the one of the plans that shows where the sidewalk is on Arlington Heights Road?
Yes, just give me 1 second, please.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, Charles, I'll start to ask the question just so I don't waste anyone's time. So, Ms. Bemler, who's going to be doing the snow removal for the property? Is that going to be, employees on site, or are you going to be hiring a service?
We typically hire a service that will come out during those heavy snow months. And so that's a third party vendor that we will, service contract out.
Okay. The reason I ask is, being on Arlington Heights Road and of course, even on Seegers, you're going to be clearing the snow from the sidewalks. And on Arlington Heights Road, we don't do the snow plowing on Arlington Heights Road. That's taken care of by the state. And I just want to make sure that you're aware that, as they come along with their trucks, that you're going to have to make sure that if you guys have cleared it once and then they plow, that you're going to be responsible. Now, I know that you guys have it set back far enough, and I sure hope so, but when those trucks are going at a pretty good rate of speed, they could be projecting snow onto your sidewalk that might have just been cleared. So I just want to make sure that we're upfront with you now, because, the idea is to make the area more pedestrian friendly, and you guys are helping with that with the design of your project, and just wanted to make sure that you guys had at least talked about that internally.
Yes, we had some other developments on IDOT roads, so we recognize that constant need. And Joe, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add to that from an operational standpoint.
Yeah, with the portfolio so heavy in Florida, snow is not a problem we've had in our other communities, but I took a note and I'll be sure to pass that on to the management team if we get to that point.
Okay. Thank you for the thoroughness of the overall project. All of the materials that you guys provided to us in my opinion, were well thought out, and is a great plan and a welcome addition to the Village of Arlington Heights, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Scaletta. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Mary, just a couple of quick questions. Thank you again for putting a really nice presentation together, and thank you for having all the right people on with us to answer all the questions. I didn't want to make an assumption here, but right now, Trammell Crow does not own this property, correct?
Correct. We are under contract to purchase the property.
Assuming you can get this approved with all the variations.
Mhm.
So if this were to go through, and we're certainly happy you're looking at Arlington Heights, we've had several projects that we've looked at as a board that we've approved, and a year, 2 years down the road, the field is still sitting there with no development. So if this was approved tonight, you know, how quickly are you purchasing the property, and when would you put a shovel in the ground?
Great question. Our plan, based on, continuing the design to get the design to, final engineering, final construction documents for the village, and getting our appropriate financing in place and all that, we would be closing on the property this summer and then breaking ground pretty immediately after that. There's some utilities that run through the center of the site that we'll have to work with ComEd and relocating. But the goal would be, and the plan and what we usually do is close on the land and immediately break ground. So, or start demo in this case.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you've already been talking to the current property owner, so you would be ready to get things in the works.
Yes.
Okay. And the next question, Charles, I'd like to just kind of, you and I had talked earlier that this site here is a for-profit project. I think you were going to see if you could maybe get some information for me on, as it sits currently, the property tax that this site pays versus if Trammell Crow were to put this development up, what would that look like?
Yes, can everybody hear me? I'm unmuted, correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So yes, staff did take a look at that, Trustee Schwingbeck, and the 2020 taxes for the current property was $175,000. Our rough ballpark estimate on taxes for this development between $5,000 to $6,000 per unit. So that would be between $800 to $1 million in taxes upon completion and full assessment. In comparison, we also took a look at the Lutheran home. They are a non-profit. They pay a little bit of taxes. Their 2020 first installment was $14,549,000. So roughly about $30,000 in 2020 taxes is what the Lutheran home would pay. The moorings, there's 3 different PIN numbers for the moorings. Their 2020 tax bill is $1,057,754. So the moorings would be comparable to this. It's a bigger site, different mix. I think they've got about 600 plus units there. Yeah, we would estimate around 5,000 or so per unit on a tax basis.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mary et al., for your presentation and for your consideration of Arlington Heights as your new home. My question has to do with the cross-property access. The parking study, and I'm not sure who wants to answer this, but the parking study shows a surplus of 30 lots. But if we have the new south property access driveway, we're going to lose 5 spots. That is not included in the surplus. Is that correct?
Correct. If we lose, you're saying if when the southern access is created, we will lose the stalls. We won't need to make them up. Those stalls would be sufficient to
Right.
support the building. Is that
Right.
you
Yeah,
understand?
no, that's right. I just wanted that to be clear. I'm just looking at the engineering plan and we're losing 5 spaces and parking is always an issue. So I just wanted to be clear about that. My second question has to do with the detention basins. Now, these detention basins are designed just for this property. Is that correct?
This is Brian Ratajczak with Spaceco again. Correct. They're designed for the site drainage. It would also include the drainage for the roadway connection that's on the property.
Okay.
If it were to be constructed in the future.
Great. And so if we lose that capacity on the smaller west basin, that's not going to have a significant impact.
Correct. We've looked at this scenario where that would happen and it can be met.
Okay. Thank you. That was just for my own edification. But the reason that I focused on this was in condition 1, item I, it says the south property owner shall bear the cost of the driveway improvements. And I'm curious as to why the property owner to the south would be building a driveway to connect the 2 properties onto this one.
That's a very good question. And this was a lot of conversations with the village staff related to the future development of that southern property. And Charles can speak to this better, but it would actually have a road that runs through the middle of it, and there'd be multiple kind of outlots, commercial outlots and things like that. So it would be easy access to these, southern amenities, whether it's, a medical office building or clinic or Walgreens or something like that. But to create connectivity in the southern corridor, that was direction from the village. And so it would be the future southern property owner that would want, our residents, our staff to have access to the amenities that they're building to the south of us. Right now, obviously that doesn't exist, but that's really where that benefit came to the southern properties, to have our community have access to their amenities. I hope I answered that. And Charles,
Yeah, I think so. Charles, do you want to add anything?
Well, initially we were silent on who should be responsible for paying for the installation of that.
Right, but it's in the recommendation, so.
Correct. And so after, some back and forth the most important thing is to, get the condition and have the property owner have this condition run with the property for some future time, because we don't know when that site to the south may redevelop. And so this is just another opportunity for egress for that property to the south or a future purchaser of that property. So, it's a small section of road. We think it's important to start getting that access easement, through the property running north-south down towards where Mitsua is on the west side of Mitsua, and connecting all these properties. Some properties will have greater benefit from the access connection than others. Would also allow for pedestrian connection as well. This is in a TIF district, and while there is no TIF request from Trammell Crow, at a future date with a redevelopment of the property to the south, it could be a TIF improvement to help ensure that driveway gets connected.
Okay. Again, it just popped out to me and I didn't understand why the cost was being placed elsewhere. I think I got it now. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Trustee Baldino. Further questions? Trustee, let me go to Trustee Tinaglia first.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Two quick things, one quick comment and one quick question. First to Mary, thank you for bringing your team here and doing this project. This is a great project on a site that is definitely ripe for something like this. I think it's gonna be a wonderful add to our community here. I wish you the best of luck. I hope it gets filled up extremely fast. And to Lucas and Mary and Charles, thanks for working so hard together to present a really great concept tonight. It's wonderful. Charles, the question is, I think for you though, could you pull up that site plan?
Yes.
So on the site plan, did I understand correctly? We're asking for a 20-foot easement along Arlington Heights Road?
Yes, that's correct.
And is this showing the new location of the sidewalk pushed back? What I'm wondering is, because it's not clear on this drawing, from the curb of Arlington Heights Road, how much green space will there be to the beach?
It's approximately 10 feet of green space with parkway trees, and then a 5-foot sidewalk. There's a requirement for a easement for part of that sidewalk. And then this exhibit shows kind of the approximate location of the 20-foot Commonwealth Edison easement beyond that.
Right, for burying some of those overhead lines we talked about, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And obviously that couldn't happen until the easement running all the way south was obtained from the other properties at some future date when they redevelop, and we have funding and can work out an agreement with Commonwealth Edison. So it's kind of a long-term concept here.
Sure, we're not going to go underground and then back above ground, and we're not going to jump around till it's all ready to go.
Correct.
So my question is really just a very simple one, and it's really just a thought. Would we consider pushing that sidewalk back and let it, instead of being so rigid and parallel with the curb cut and only 10 feet back, could we have that meander a little bit to get closer to those parking stalls and give a little bit larger green space? There are areas where I think you could recess that another 10 or 15 or even 20 feet. I would just be a fan of loosening that rigidity up there a little bit and adding some more green buffering with some more trees to make it a legitimate walkway. And I think 5 feet is too narrow. I'd rather see you make that sidewalk 7 feet if you can make it that big. So certainly not anything that's going to affect my vote here tonight. It's just something to consider as the engineering gets more further along, and if there's any way to get that done.
Sure, and we can certainly continue those discussions, Trustee Tinaglia. The only challenge we had was with Commonwealth Edison on Block 425. In the many meetings we had with them, they did not want to put their high transmission lines underneath sidewalks or other improvements. And so that was one of the big delays that we had trying to work that out. It certainly could, there is space there, you're correct, to kind of weave the sidewalk there. So I think if we're able to have discussions with Commonwealth Edison before Trammell Crow finalizes their building permit plans and we can make some adjustments, we can certainly work with that. But that would be a bit of a concern without reaching back out to Commonwealth Edison. And of course, they're staffing in 5 or 10 years' time, they might have a different opinion at that time as well.
Right. It's just a thought. I just think it would be more comfortable visually and safe-wise. So if there's a way to consider it, go for it. If not, I understand.
Okay.
Thanks,
That's
Trustee.
all I had. Thank you, Mayor Hayes.
Thank you, Trustee Tinaglia. Charles, can you take down the site plan for a second?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Trustee Scaletta, you had a question?
Maybe I just had one follow-up question, and I appreciate Trustee Baldino bringing up about the south easements, because when I was reading it, Charles, are we putting the petitioner in a very unique position where we're telling them to work out a cross-access easement, but then we're also putting in language that says that the property owner of the south property bears all the costs. I mean, I don't even know about the legality of it, but how do you say, hey, go work this out with, your neighbor, and make every effort that you can. Oh, by the way, let them know that they're responsible for all the costs if their property is redeveloped.
Yeah, I mean, from staff's point of view, we don't object to not, having language in there about who pays for that. It could be silent. Some of the other components of the language that we worked out, make sense as far as, providing insurance and qualified contractor and things of that nature. But the language could be silent on who pays for it, and the two parties could negotiate and work that out. That's typically what's done. There are some, every easement is a little unique. So there is a cross-access easement in place just north for what used to be Autumn Leaves, just north of Gulf Road. There's a driveway that comes out and curves around on the north side of that building. And that's set up in a cross-access easement to allow for the property to the north to connect. But when they do, they have to traverse that property, and then it is the property owners to the north's responsibility to improve that section. So that is an example that's somewhat close to this, but they probably have a greater benefit from that easement.
The one you were talking about, the one further north.
Correct, the one at Autumn Leaves, yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. In that situation, that's their ingress and egress, right?
Correct.
Is on the Autumn. Okay, but in this go ahead.
There is a piece of Autumn Leaves property north of the driveway that the property to the north would have to install a small segment to connect to that.
Right, but they're getting full benefit of that by being able to get in and out of their own property, right?
Correct. Yes.
The people to the south of this development, would they necessarily have to go through this development to be able to get in and out of their own property?
No, they were currently, and presume they would still in the future have access to Arlington Heights Road and Tony Road. If and when the office building to the south redevelops, I would imagine there would be a restricted access on Arlington Heights Road. So there would be some additional benefit to connect to the north, but they definitely have access on both west and east properties.
Okay. I appreciate the comparison. I don't know that they're equal, but I appreciate you giving me an example. I don't know. I looked at that language and I just kept looking at it going, how do we make this happen? And, is it legal? Oh, there's our attorney. Maybe he can explain to me how legal this is.
I can say, Kevin, I thank you, Trustee Scaletta. I agree with Director Perkins' response. And all I wanted to say is if the board wanted to proceed and simply remove the language about cost responsibility from that condition, there would be no legal problem with doing so. So this really comes down to whether the board wants to include any part of these conditions or not. I don't have any concern if you took that out. I don't have any concerns, and if we left it in, I don't have a legal issue with either. It may affect the negotiation ultimately when the time comes. And part of the challenge we are having is how do we design a condition that will have any teeth when we don't yet have that property owner at the table to negotiate it in real time. So that's we're trying to navigate that challenge.
I would agree, and I think that that might be an opportunity where TIF comes into play because it makes a lot of sense. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Trustee Scaletta. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but Mary, this is something that staff is asking you to do with your property to make it available for some future use that we don't know about down the way, right?
Yes.
You're going to give up some of your land. And what you're asking, not staff, what you're asking to not have to cover the cost of that. That's what this is about, right?
Correct. The staff has requested this southern access. It doesn't necessarily benefit our property today,
Right.
but we want to give that opportunity to the southern owner. And so
Right.
if in the event, and maybe they never utilize it, right? But if in the
Right.
event that they want to, for their benefit, they can absolutely do that because we'll have
Right.
it.
So,
ready.
so while we may say, or our staff may say that we don't really care if the language is in there, and Mr. Passman is, 100% correct, we don't care. But you really don't want to pay for this down the road or pay for even half of it if it's really mainly going to benefit the people to the south.
That is correct.
All right, so the point here is kind of obvious. We want what we want to get done here. It's a great idea, Charles. It's a great idea. Don't misunderstand. But at the same time, I don't really want to burden this developer with something that may happen later and make them, number one, give up their land. Number two, make them have to negotiate to pay for it. Let's let the future developer pay for the cost. These folks are going to give up the land. So that's where I stand on it.
And if I may just add one clarification, if you look at point B on that condition, and we've been pretty firm on this, we want to make sure that the detention is redesigned to accommodate the roadway.
Right.
And so that when the property owner to the south comes along, all they're building is the roadway. They're not having to reconstruct the whole detention area, which could potentially double the cost.
Right.
So we've been pretty firm on that. I just wanted to point that out.
No, it makes sense. These folks are going to do everything they can to make it a viable, reasonable solution down the road, and with their land being available. So I think protecting them by saying they're not going to have to pay for the additional cost of putting asphalt in there makes sense.
I would concur with Trustee Tinaglia on that. Thank you, Jim. Any further questions or comments from the board before we go to the audience? Seeing none. Heidi Graham, you've been very patient. Heidi, you're first, and then Keith Moons, and you both are reminded of the 3-minute time limit. Ms. Graham?
Mayor Hayes, can you allow Keith to go first, please?
Sure.
Thank
Sure,
you.
go ahead. Mr. Moons?
Oh, thank you, President Hayes, and Happy New Year to everyone. It's glad to see we're all back here on the Zoomer here, but I have to object, President Hayes, to the exclusion of this project from our inclusionary affordable housing ordinance on a couple counts. The board removed senior residential communities in section 1704 and 1709 from the housing ordinance. Those two sections require that this project alone to have 5% of the 93 rental independent living units or 5 affordable on-site units included, or a fee of $75,000 per 10% of the units. The removal of this residential communities from the ordinance was done because of perceived complications with senior living, but this isn't true, President Hayes. And in independent livings, it was easily calculated in that section 1709. It was easily calculated there, but was taken out. And it was removed to not negatively impact investment by adding additional requirements for affordable housing. This to encourage the development of luxury upscale senior units such as this project. So it looks as though this is what's happened here tonight going forward. Luxury age restricted independent units at the expense of excluding one of our most vulnerable residents, low income seniors. So I'd ask that the board move to amend the existing ordinance to re-include those two sections. The second point I wanted to make, President Hayes, is that this project's in a TIF district, the South Arlington Heights TIF district. The affordable ordinance currently states that all zoning districts publicly assisted, which includes TIF funding, must include 10% on-site affordable units. Now, you know, I understand that this petitioner is not requesting any cash awards right now to locate there, but really all TIF districts are funded with our public tax dollars that are then used to provide an incentive to what they call, I guess, prime the pump or develop in blighted areas. They're receiving a benefit from our public dollars, especially if they request TIF funds later for developing of a parking lot or whatever. They need to provide on-site affordable units in either way. I mean, the village deposited $100,000 in this TIF account alone this year. And just because the petitioner is not getting a cash award now, they are still benefiting from our TIF dollars. And that's why they're in this TIF district in the first place. So I'd ask the board to include or enforce the existing affordable housing ordinance right now on this senior living development to provide included affordable senior rental independent living units within a TIF district. Now, just one quick comment too, I just want to say, President Hayes, in my opinion, this project should have stopped at the Housing Commission before it got to here to at least publicly discuss this affordable housing component. The project sailed through the conceptual plan, the plan and design commissions where discussion of affordable housing is not allowed. These commission chairmen, though, did allow us to talk about the affordable housing component here, but they were not happy about it. So finally, I think we need to enforce these two remedies, amend the ordinance, enforce the ordinance as it stands today for TIF districts that are necessary to address this serious omission in our ordinance that squarely, in my view, discriminates against our lower income seniors. Thank you all, and have a good, happy new year.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moons. Ms. Graham, are you ready?
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. It was good to see you the other night at the closing of Grant's Shell. I appreciate you attending. Again, I'm Heidi Graham. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, and Buffalo Grove. So I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the League of Women Voters, but I am also a resident, as most of you know, of the village of Arlington Heights. Additionally, I have parents who are currently in an nearly identical retirement community in Texas. I have researched almost every retirement community in the Arlington Heights area that is like this, as well as in both Dallas and Houston area. I'm very well acquainted with this type of community. They're wonderful. I understand that this is a for-profit model. It is not a not-for-profit, and I am absolutely not opposed to a company making a profit. However, the League of Women Voters has a long-standing stance on fair and affordable housing. As our village struggles with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in that, housing is key to solving the issues that we face as a community. And when we talk about affordable housing, anytime I have been at any meeting at the village where affordable housing has been discussed, village leaders have time and time again said that seniors and veterans are our priority for affordable housing. To say that and then turn around and exempt a development from the affordable housing ordinance is disingenuous. And I urge you as a board, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying I have the answers for how affordable housing can be part of this project. So I am asking, pleading really with the developer and with the village to do the hard work that is necessary, that we have imparted on you as our elected officials and our hired employees of the village. Do that hard work, dig deep, and please find a way that we can include affordable housing for seniors. This is a we are in a pandemic right now. And I promise you, having parents that are in a residence like this, I understand that we need them. And for those of us with privilege, it is easy. But I see how difficult this is. I cannot imagine being in a situation to have, because my father does have dementia, and it could bankrupt my parents. Luckily, my husband and I have the financial wherewithal to be able to step in, but we also have children who are in college. So the people who end up taking on the bulk of this responsibility are in what we call the sandwich generation. We are caught between our aging parents and our children who have college needs. For someone like me, it is not a choice. I can afford to do both things. But I am the exception, not the rule. And I urge you to please dig and figure out how we can include affordable housing. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your service to our village.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. And we do have a couple other hands. Christina Crucius.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you. My name is Christina Cruzius. My pronouns are she, her, and I live at 204 North Patton. I'm also concerned about the fact that this housing development does not include affordable housing units. We've had a number of discussions as the village over the past few years about the fact that Arlington Heights does not have enough affordable housing. And we even passed a new inclusionary housing ordinance, but it does not include, but it was changed so that essentially this particular unit would be exempt. But I'm really concerned that this goes against the spirit of the inclusionary housing ordinance to make this particular development exempt. As others have said, seniors are particularly vulnerable, low-income seniors especially, and we need to not just talk about this. We need to do something. It might mean we need to spend a little more money as a village, but if that's what it takes to live up to our commitments, let's do it. Also, given our village's history of denying affordable housing access, we need to be particularly intentional about incorporating it into future developments and not set a precedent or really continue our tradition of writing off affordable housing to loopholes. So please, I am asking as well that you revise the ordinance so that senior living facilities are included, so that we can take our commitments to affordable housing seriously, and also make, also as others have said, this is really important to diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So we need to really make this tangible. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cruzius. And finally, George Motto. Mr. Motto.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that I agree with everything that's been said by the other public speakers. I realize this is a very complicated subject. As you know, I am chairperson of the Senior Citizens Commission Age-Friendly Community Initiative. And at our last meeting, we approved an action plan which we have submitted to the Board of Trustees based on our survey that we did. And believe it or not, the top issue for senior citizens is affordable housing, transportation, and a central communication center. So I think that we must start the conversation for a comprehensive affordable housing plan. And as I remember from the Planning Commission, the rent on a single on a one-bedroom apartment was something like $3,000 or $4,000. No one raised that tonight. Now, I know that that includes a lot of services that would not be available in a regular apartment building, but it certainly cannot be considered affordable housing. Now, we must have, and I know Heidi and Keith have mentioned this, we must start having a conversation. And as someone said too, when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's mandatory that if you want an inclusive community, that people working in the community that aren't making a really big salary can live in the community at least close to their work. So housing, affordable housing for everyone, not only seniors, is really the linchpin for a DEI initiative, which I understand and not understand, which Arlington Heights now is committed to. So I, again, respectfully request that whatever happens tonight, I understand the complexities of this issue, but from here on in, this has to be a primary concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Motto. Next is Madeline McCarran.
Can you hear me now?
We gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Madeline McCarran, and I am also a member of the League of Women Voters and a resident of Arlington Heights on the south side, so not far at all from this proposed complex. And I agree with everything that's been said about the affordable housing, and I would urge you to give a strong consideration to that. I also wanted to bring up the question of snow removal, and I was glad to see that the developer and Mr. Scaletta were concerned about making it pedestrian friendly. But I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that when the village plows clear the roads, they create large snowbanks in the crosswalks. And somebody needs to take responsibility if this is going to be pedestrian friendly to provide transit all the way to the shopping areas. I've spoken to people shopping at Aldi and shopping uptown, and they tell me that in the winter, they have to walk in the street because the sidewalks are dead ends. So we don't want people walking in the street, especially on Arlington Heights Road. So I would like the developers to do something about that, to take some responsibility for that. And I would also like the village to consider that in a broader scale, that this is a village-wide problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarran. And then last is Lori Grainaway.
Ms. Grainaway, you're still on mute.
Lori, you have to take yourself off mute.
Okay.
There you
Can
go.
you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lori Grainaway. I'm a resident of the Village of Arlington Heights. I've been following quite closely everything the village has done with affordable housing. I have to say, just to start off by saying I'm really impressed with everything you've done. I realize that there's very few villages, cities around the Chicago area that actually have requirements for affordable housing, and I appreciate that. It's very important to me. However, I'm really disappointed that the village has taken the stance on senior housing, that affordable housing not be built into senior living. I won't repeat everything that's been said, but it really does seem to go against the spirit of all the arguments for affordable housing here in Arlington Heights. People that have lived here their whole lives, when they need housing and they need help the most, it doesn't seem that that's an option that's being offered. You know, the average Social Security income is only $1,500 a month. At a previous meeting by the developers, I heard that the average cost for units is, I think they said $4,500 a month. Could have it wrong, but that was the number that I heard. The average, well, I wouldn't say average, but greater than 37% of the population here in Arlington Heights earn less than $50,000. So this is, you know, this is an expensive property, and it would be, and hopefully it's something that we're working towards, is to have affordable units for our senior citizens for when they need it. And I recognize that there are reasons why that wasn't put in before. I don't know what the answer is to make that happen, but I hope that you work towards that, because I feel that's really important, that we can't have affordable housing for some, but not for all of our citizens. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, Lori. I see no other hands from the audience, and so I will then move back to the village board. And before I entertain any further questions from the board, let me just go to our village manager, Randy Recklaus. And Randy, if I could call on you to just address some of the issues that were brought up by the public in the comment period, specifically regarding the exemption of senior housing from the inclusionary ordinance, and also Mr. Moon's question regarding the TIF district financing.
Sure, happy to. And, you know, as it was stated, out of the couple of hundred municipalities in Chicagoland, there are 7 that have an affordable housing ordinance. And Arlington Heights, we're happy to say that we're one of them. We recently updated our affordable housing ordinance this fall after several months of discussion, several public meetings. And, you know, one of the issues that was discussed quite a bit was this issue of how best to address the issue of affordable housing for seniors. And what was determined was that, number one, I think everyone acknowledges that affordable housing for seniors is a challenge and an issue. And there's a couple of different ways that that can be addressed. One is what we have for our kind of at market non-senior housing, where developers are required to provide affordable housing directly or through a contribution. Other programs that we have, have created an affordable housing fund, and with that is phase 2 of that discussion that's going to be going on later this year to talk about how can we leverage those funds, and now we do have a revenue stream for those funds to address some of these issues that we feel aren't being adequately addressed by the creation of affordable housing through developer contributions. And this could be one of the issues that's addressed. We all acknowledge that that's an issue. The other thing is we have current programs that allow individuals, and these are means tested, that help them stay in their homes to do home improvements and so on and so forth. And very often people taking us up on those programs are seniors, so they can age in place. And you know, some of the barriers to them staying in their home we can eliminate by doing some of those home improvements through our existing programs. And so the question is really, what is the best mechanism to help address the senior housing issue? And there was after some thorough discussion and analysis, it was determined by the board back in January and then again in July that given the complexity of the senior housing business model, where unlike other senior housing developments, food is being provided, a certain amount of care is being provided, and how that's all priced is very complex. And the determination was made that at this time, we did not have a good solution on how to just demand, senior housing contributions in that model. It doesn't mean it's not a priority. Doesn't mean that it's something that the village doesn't want to address or doesn't intend to address on some level. It just means that that type of requirement isn't something that our ordinance deals with. And that's something that was done by choice. I want to clarify one thing. This project is not receiving any kind of exemption or relief from our inclusionary housing ordinance. They did not seek it, nor are they getting it. What we're saying is that it is just not subject to it. And so what we're here to talk about tonight is whether or not this development meets all of our standards. And we're not here to revisit what our standards ought to be. That discussion has been had. That doesn't mean we can't continue to discuss that. It's just not on the agenda this evening. And I know that's a difficult thing. Whenever we have a new development, it's an opportunity to discuss things. But really, this applicant has gone through this process with an understanding of what our standards are, and they're at the precipice of hopefully, from their perspective, gaining the village's approval. And there's an argument that for us to move the goalposts at this juncture would be unfair to any applicant. And I think that's a point that needs to be made. As for their presence in a TIP district, again, regardless of whether a senior housing project resides in a TIP district or not, they are exempt. That's not relief from our ordinance. That's contained in our ordinance very clearly and was done so very consciously through a board discussion earlier this year. This applicant, being present in a TIP district does not give a property owner any sort of benefit automatically. They would be paying the same taxes that they normally would. And the only way for them to receive a benefit is if they get some aspect of their development or some improvement related to their development paid for directly by the village. And at this point in time, we have not received any formal requests for that from the developer. As has been pointed out, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but their presence in the TIP does not give them any benefit. I just wanted to make that point. And I don't know if there's any other aspect of that you would like me to address, Mayor, but I thought those were the two open issues.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ecklaus. Trustee Canty.
So I just thank you for that, Randy, and thank everybody for all of their comments. The affordable housing ordinance that we have is something that I am personally pretty proud of. I think the board started this work, and then I think it's one of the things that we've done that came with a lot of negotiation. And I don't think that that's what's before us here tonight, but to that point, I don't think it serves us or our ordinance well if we are constantly looking to change it at every opportunity. I do think that we have to give some opportunity for the ordinance to do its work and to be effective, because one of the main things that I was looking for from the ordinance was consistency, so that we weren't negotiating on every development that came before us and trying to nickel and dime everything that came through. I wanted finality for staff and finality for developers and finality for residents. And so I do think that we accomplished that, however imperfectly we may have done it. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that Randy mentioned, but one of the things that's most important that I think we can look to is moving into that next step of the affordable housing trust and really starting the work of how do we make most use of that in a way that benefits members of this community. And I think that's taken some time as we've been working to build up that trust through the fee in lieu of. Randy, I am a much bigger fan of brick and mortar units than I am of fee in lieu, but I get more comfortable with fee in lieu if we can put that to good use to get people into brick and mortar. And so I would like to ask members of our community to, be thinking about that and going forward in that way before we very quickly jump to pushing to change an ordinance that has barely had an opportunity to be put to good use yet.
Thank you, Trustee Canty. Good point. Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Moons, I see you have your hand up. You've already had a bite at the apple, so I'll give you one more minute if you would.
Thank you, President Hayes. Yeah, thanks, Randy, for that explanation. I would point out, one, that if we amend the ordinance to re-include section 1709, it clearly states how we can fix affordable housing in these kinds of units. And I think this is a big hole in this ordinance right now that would be covered up by a section that was already in the ordinance. As far as TIF districts go, they're receiving a benefit of our TIF dollars, regardless if they're asking for more awards or not. Now, what happens when they come back and want to access the TIF fund, which is why, of course, they're there for other developments? If they access the TIF funds to put in parking, whatever, they need to put in some affordable housing according to what the ordinance says.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moons. All right, we have a proposal. We have a unanimous recommendation from the Plan Commission as modified by the staff with agreement from the developer. So what is the will of the board? Trustee Scaletta.
Mayor, I would move to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendations.
As modified by the staff.
As modified by the staff.
Okay. The motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, congratulations, Ms. Bemler and the whole team at Trammell Crow. We welcome you to the Village of Arlington Heights. Thank you again for choosing our great community. I think as your market study found, we have a very healthy senior living segment of our community, and we're very proud of that. We've got a lot of senior living facilities in Arlington Heights, and we can always use more. And so we appreciate your willingness to help us serve our residents better. And so thank you, and again, welcome, and best of luck as you get shovels in the ground, and hopefully there'll be a lot of good cooperation from the weather. So again, thank you and welcome to Arlington Heights.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you guys.
All right, thank you all. All right, there is no other new business, and so we move on then to the report of the village manager, Mr. Recklaus.
Nothing this evening.
All right, anything from the board under petitions and communications? All right, Trustee Scaletta.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Thank you all again for joining us this evening, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Good night.
Good night.
I know.